The judicial decisions that have come out of River State have been largely unfortunate. It's not the simple fact that there are conflicts. It's the fact that the courts have allowed themselves to be manipulated and to be used in furtherance of political causes. And that is so unfortunate, because when I was growing up, the courts were a highly revered institution. And it's unfortunate that the present occupants of the position have largely brought the position into disrepute. And I feel ashamed for them.
It is very sad and heartbreaking to see what is going on in the judicial system of this country lately. And I really don't know why they have decided to go this low, reduce themselves, their credibility and their capacity to be questioned by every citizen of this country. And it is very obvious, even to the blind, to know that something is wrong somewhere. There is this popular saying that judiciary is the last hope of the common man. But with what is going on now, the common man has lost hope on the judicial system of this country. In fact, it is very almost impossible for them to drop judgment that will not be questioned by the citizens of this country. And it was not this bad before, though it was not so good, but it haven't go this low. And this low level started immediately one man resumed office in Abuja. And everybody that wants to talk about what is happening in the judicial system now will talk about this same man. Why should they allow one particular person to ruin their reputation and their character? In fact, another professor have given them to shred them into pieces because of that same man on what is happening in Rivers State and other places. In fact, let me allow you to watch this video yourself. And as you are watching it, make sure you are sharing, and also do well to subscribe to my channel for more updates. And I'll be back. Let's go there.
Things happening in Nigeria. One of them, of course, River State. You must be across the deepening crisis there in general, and the latest development where a federal high court in Abuja has ordered the central bank to stop disbursing monthly allocations to River State until the State House of Assembly starts to function normally again. From both a legal point of view and as a one-time politician yourself, what do you make of the developments there?
I think the River State situation is most unfortunate. It's been illegality compounded by illegality. But let's try and break down the issues. The starting point is whether the 27 lawmakers are indeed lawmakers. As you said in the intro, the courts have vacillated on that issue, and anyone who is noble in his intentions must say that Section 109(1)(g) of the Constitution is very clear that where there is carpet crossing, here supported by a sworn affidavit by Mr. Amehula, or whatever he calls himself, saying that he's cross-carpeted to the APC, that should be open and short. It's very straightforward. There is nothing to interpret.
But the argument has been, harkening back to those lawmakers who, as you said, ostensibly defected from their parties, and whether or not they should, as a result of the kind of defection that took place, lose their seats in the State Assembly. They are now arguing that they didn't defect, and that merely saying publicly that you are defecting is not enough unless you actually follow and practically implement the procedures for defection. I mean, what do you reckon? Because, I mean, a judge in River State has said that the process of defection was not completed. And I believe the case is going to the Supreme Court.
There is no such thing as a process of defection. It's like saying there is a process of resignation. There isn't. Once you resign, the resignation is self-executing.
That's a good example.
It happens ipso facto. It's also similar to lunacy. If you're a lunatic, you are mad. There is no process of lunacy. It's ipso facto. So there is no process of defection. Once a man says, I defect, I leave, or have left, that's the end of it. There's nothing to interpret. So that position is very clear. But what is even more astonishing is that the defected politicians are the ones who have obtained the ruling from the Federal High Court. But I think the Federal High Court obviously was misled because the receipt of state allocation is at the heart of the federation. It's not a dispute between the lawmakers and the governor. The entitlement to receive FAC monies every month is very central to the federalism we operate. It is not possible for Rivers State to be a federating state and not to receive that money. This is very different from the dispute that Obasanjo had with Governor Tinubu at that time, where Obasanjo seized the local government monies. He did not seize the monies of Lagos State. He couldn't seize the monies of Lagos. He thought he could seize the monies of the local government, but the Supreme Court in 2004 made it clear that he had no power to do so, and that his act was totally illegal and unconstitutional. Of course, the difference between Obasanjo seizing local government funds in Lagos and the Federal High Court purporting to interpret or misinterpret the law, there is some difference. But clearly the judge did not understand the essence of federalism, and I had no power. He could not make the order he made because Rivers State cannot be a federating state without being entitled to receive. What it does with that money is entirely an internal matter. I see how he qualified the order by saying until there's a state appropriation law. But that's like placing the cart before the horse.
But I mean, well, just to go along that line, because I mean, you understand these things better than most. Some have argued along exactly what you just said, that the court is only stopping the money until the legal T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. I understand there is a rule or law that says that before monies are disbursed, it has to be legally appropriated. And the word is legally appropriated by the State Assembly. And that at the moment, there is no proper appropriation law in force in Rivers State, for the simple reason that the State Assembly was not properly constituted to make that appropriations law, and therefore it is null and void.
Yes, I hear that argument, but I think that argument is mistaken. There is a clear distinction between the entitlement of a state. The state is not the governor. The River State is not Fubara, it's not Wike. It's more than a geographical area consisting of people who federated with other people from other states. Those are the people who are entitled to the money. The monies do not belong to Fubara. The monies do not belong to the local, to the House of Assembly. So there is no capacity to stop the people of Rivers State from receiving their own share as a federating unit. Once that money is received, how the money is disbursed is a matter of appropriation law. Well, that's why I said that trying to stop it upstream is trying to place the cart before the horse. The money cannot be stopped. The money does not belong to Fubara. The money belongs to the people of Rivers State. That money must come. Whether or not you can stop Fubara once the money is in Rivers State from disbursing it is a dispute between him and but you cannot stop the people of Rivers State.
That's a very interesting assessment. And I mean, you mentioned that case from the 2004 Supreme Court ruling on Lagos State versus the federal government, essentially versus Obasanjo, the former president. I mean, at the risk of making you repeat yourself, but in the interest of absolute clarity, do you see any precedent in place in that case where the Supreme Court said that the federal government had no right to withhold funding for the local government, or it does not at all apply to Rivers State in this case?
I don't think it's directly applicable, but as a matter of constitutional principle, you can draw some parallels or some analogy between the two. In one case, it's a president refusing to release, to sign whatever he needed to sign. In this case, it's a court saying the central bank should not release. So to that extent, you might draw some artificial distinctions by saying the dispute is always resolved or is supposed to be resolved in a constitutional democracy by the courts. But what the court has done is simply a caricature, and I think the whole thing is just a theater of absurdity.
But let me ask you this: in that, for instance, the Obasanjo case versus Lagos State, what became apparent is that the president needed to sign something in order for the authority to be given to disburse that money to the states. I'm wondering if that disbursement is not qualified in any way and is automatic constitutionally, because whatever state it is entitled to it and there can be no exceptions. Why would it require the president's endorsement for the money to be released?
Well, I think there is a distinction between saying the local governments were entitled once the FAC or RMASC, FAC meets, they become ipso facto entitled to their own share. That's clear. But of course, as a matter of operations, someone has got to sign because the monies are not self-disbursing.
Right.
So you are entitled to your share, but someone has to do something for you to receive it. That person does not determine your entitlement.
Right.
It's like a clerical or administrative act.
Okay,
to put the money
I see what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if, for example, we assume that this studio was filled with monies belonging to the states, you could divide them up. But then to take the portion belonging to each federating unit or each state, someone has to physically go there.
Right.
And that's administrative or clerical act.
Right.
And that was what was holding. Here, the Federal High Court is saying to the central bank, when you receive these monies, don't release them. But the Federal High Court has no power to do so because the federal, as I have said, the entitlement to receive those monies is at the heart of the federalism. It's nothing to do with the minor squabble between 25 or 27 defected members and the government. The monies belong to the people of Rivers State.
That's a very, very interesting analysis. But just returning to the fact that you mentioned those defecting lawmakers, assuming they did defect, can the House of Assembly legally continue business with just 4 members sitting, or does that violate the rules with regard to the formation of a quorum?
I think that's really a difficult question. But of course, the state cannot stop functioning because it's lost its members, or it's lost a significant number of its members. I believe that the correct thing for them to do would have been for them to call, for INEC to conduct fresh elections.
Like emergency elections.
Absolutely, to fill those states. But if INEC refuses, for whatever reason, because it's politically partial or is not independent, or for whatever reason it fails to do so, that cannot prevent the state from functioning.
So, but one could also argue that in the case of the court, whose job is purely to interpret the law, that the court may well have been right to say that, well, 4 members doesn't constitute a quorum. And therefore they can't pass an Appropriations Act. You see what I mean?
I see what you mean, but I'm not sure that is correct.
I mean, do you think that the aspersions that are being cast on the judiciary with regard to this particular decision and other recent rulings on Rivers State over the current political crisis are sort of justified or not? It's a difficult question, isn't it?
I think I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but I think on the whole, the judicial decisions that have come out of River State have been largely unfortunate. It's not the simple fact that there are conflicts. It's the fact that the courts have allowed themselves to be manipulated and to be used in furtherance of political causes. And that is so unfortunate because when I was growing up, the courts were a highly revered institution. And it's unfortunate that the present occupants of the position have largely brought the position into disrepute. And I feel ashamed for them. And I hope that some of them feel ashamed for themselves. Because as soon as you go, we all knew that soon Mr. Wike was going to procure a judgment. I use procure because I don't know how. Of course, these cases are argued, and of course, I go to the court, but he doesn't seem to lose any case. And it's unusual for a person to always win all his cases, whatever the facts are, whatever the legal issues are. So I use procure advisedly. Right. That he does actually procure. And those judges should be ashamed that Mr. Wike is able to obtain whatever judgment he wants from them. And it's even worse, and I think the legal profession as well should be ashamed that Wike is a bencher. I mean, the man who has such poor reputation. I mean, but I mean, it sounds like you really smell a rat in this sort of... More than a rat. Okay, let's say, a cat. A cat. I mean, in this sort of, not just in this latest decision, but in other decisions. Yes. I mean, so basically, you don't trust the interpretation of the law in that ruling. I cannot trust the interpretation because sometimes we say it is difficult to know where incompetence ends and corruption begins. I mean, a judge could be stupid, and a judge could misunderstand the very basics of constitutional democracy. And you cannot castigate such a judge because he's so ignorant or she's so ignorant. But you say he's incompetent. On the other hand, sometimes a decision could be so crass that you cannot describe it fairly and honestly as a product of incompetence. The only way to describe it is that it's corruptly procured. And I think even among senior judicial officers, there is widespread concern about the integrity of the judges. And the fact that a number of judges, unfortunately, are corrupt, are biased, whether the bias is caused by political affiliations or economic and monetary inducements is anyone's guess. But the fact of the matter is that what they have done in Rivers State leaves a lot to be desired. Well, I mean, in addition to being brutally frank, I'm afraid what you're saying is also incredibly depressing. I mean, do you have a comfort blanket, something that will bring us cheer with regard to the worrying developments in Rivers State? I am concerned because I think that the political actors in Rivers State are almost pushing democracy to the brink. And one has got to be very careful about the steps which are being taken in Rivers State. The impunity, the lawlessness. I do not see how one or two people can hold an entire state to ransom. It shows the failure of institutions. We saw what happened on 6th of January in America. The American institutions were strong enough to resist President Trump. But in Nigeria, all the institutions are on a leash. And that is very depressing. And it's not just depressing, it's worrying. Because as I've said, the democracy is being pushed to the brink. And I fear that they should be careful. Otherwise, it will tip over and everybody will be full of regrets. And along the lines of what you're saying, which I have to say is just, incredibly accurate, also deeply worrying. I mean, let's turn to the issue of another institution, the EFCC, and its legality, which is being challenged in court at the moment. Do you think the FCC is properly legally constituted or not? Well, I mean, to the extent that it's capable of being created by statute, it was created by statute, which went through the processes of lawmaking. My understanding of the arguments about its legality is that the EFCC legislation is supposed to implement the UN Anti-Corruption Convention. And therefore, under Section 12 of the Constitution of Nigeria specifies a procedure for the domestication of international treaties into Nigerian law. But I'm afraid I don't think that is a correct argument because we have not tried to domesticate the UN Convention on Corruption into Nigerian law. We have simply taken some aspects of it and implemented the way we see fit. And I think there's a difference between trying to domesticate a convention or a treaty and then trying to take 2 or 3 provisions from a treaty and enact as your own law. So to that extent, I don't see the challenge. But I'm worried about the EFCC, not about its constitutional foundations, but because the people who are challenging it, the governors, are often the people who are squandering our commonwealth. There is so much impunity going on in the states. And when you go to some of the states, you'll be so ashamed that in 20 or 24 years of democracy, there is absolutely nothing to show for it. And the governors have squandered all the monies. The EFCC tries to bring them to book, and then they kick back. And that's corruption fighting back. But having said that, the EFCC itself is not a credible organization.
Well, I was going to ask you that because I was going to ask you beyond its legality. I mean, how well do you think the EFCC is doing when it comes to the job of fighting corruption in Nigeria?
I think EFCC has 3 fundamental problems. The first is that the EFCC is often being used for settling many scores. Some are political scores, some are even social scores. So you could run away from your girlfriend, and your girlfriend could go to EFCC, and the EFCC will invite you. And you're asking yourself, what has this got to do with economic or financial crime? So that's blatant abuse of power. That's number one. The second one is that the EFCC has abandoned its mandate and reduced itself to a debt collection agency. Notwithstanding the numerous court decisions saying the EFCC must stay within the narrow confines of law enforcement, of financial and economic crimes, the EFCC has gone on for debt recovery. And finally, the EFCC itself, a number of officers there, are more corrupt than those they are chasing. So you remember what happened to Mr. Bawa, Mr. Metwale, where Mr. Metwale finished his tenure as governor of Zamfara State, and he said he was invited by Mr. Bawa to bring $2 million so as not to be investigated. So the EFCC itself has become a corrupt organization, which needs to be completely disbanded and a new body set up.
So your assessment, in summary, basically, as we round off the discussion, is that the EFCC, not only does it not have the resources to properly fight corruption in Nigeria, it doesn't have the ethics.
The EFCC has the resources. It doesn't have the ethics. The EFCC majors on minor issues. For example, catching students and showing them as cyber criminals. And so it says it's procured 1,000 convictions. And when you look at them, it's people who have defrauded someone of $20 or $22. That's not the mandate. So that's a peripheral aspect of it. The central mandate is to ensure that the resources which are put in the hands of states are used for states. And in that respect, the EFCC has failed woefully.
Confirm. Now, just like I said before, it is very sad and disheartening to see such a respected entity like the judiciary to be going through such ridicule, lack of trust and shamefulness by the citizens. The judiciary that was supposed to be the last hope of the common man, but because of what is going on, the common man has lost hope on the judiciary. How can someone be going to the judiciary to procure judgment, just like what the professor was saying on this video? It is very sad to see that happening in the judicial system of this country, and the trust that everybody have on them is going down seriously as the day goes by, which is very bad. And I believe that they can still turn the hands of Croc around and start doing the right thing and rebuild their reputation back to the way it used to be. But the choice is for them to make. Anyway, share your thought with me on the comment section. And of course, you know the vibe now. Click on that subscribe button, follow and share for more updates. Because like this, we move.